are from the Lebanese Language Institute, and we're going to be talking today about the Lebanese language in the 21st century. It's a small presentation, and we're going to have a couple of things that we're going to be talking about today. Some of them are a little bit about the history of the Lebanese language. We're going to be talking about the Lebanese Language Institute. We're going to be talking about the Lebanese alphabet, some of the resources that we're providing for the language, and the relationship between the Lebanese language and IT. And we're going to have a little bit of questions and answers at the end. Okay. So we're going to start off with a couple of definitions to clear out what a language is and what is meant when we say what is a native language. So these are some minor definitions we're going to go over very quickly. A language is a systematic means of communicating ideas or feelings through the use of conventionalized signs, sounds, gestures, or marks having understood meanings. So almost all of the current spoken languages develop some form of an ancestral language. And languages, they evolve and they die, as we know. For example, the Latin language, it evolved and nobody speaks the Latin language anymore. Languages existed way before writing. So before we invented a system of writing, obviously people were talking to each other. And some languages are written and some languages are not. And there are a lot of Indian languages that are spoken, but none of them are written. So the second definition we're going to go over is the native language. The native language is usually defined as the mother tongue or the first language that a person speaks. So we learn this language without the need to study it. So you learn it at home, in your environment, just by talking to your parents, your friends. That's how you learn that language. So also it could be someone's dominant language if, for example, somebody knows more than one language. For example, my son speaks 3 languages and he's only 4 years old. But for now, his dominant language is the English language because that's what he uses every day. That's what he talks with every day with his friends. That's what he watches TV with every day. It is the dominant language, even though he speaks Lebanese and even though he also speaks Russian because his mother is also Russian. So the native language is not necessarily the language of literature and commerce. And neither is necessarily the official language of the state. It could be, for example, the native language that we were speaking at one point was what we refer to as the Arabic language, but the French was the language of the state during the French Mandate. And there's also a couple of other definitions that we should be aware of. One of them is the dialect, and the other one is the accent. So what is a dialect? A dialect is a spoken variety of a language, which normally pertains to a particular area, community, or group, often with relatively minor differences in vocabulary, style, spelling, and pronunciation. So a dialect develops from a language. For example, there is the Canadian dialect of the French language. It developed from the French language. Also, a dialect can develop into a language. For example, the dialect of Tuscan Latin, which was the dialect of Dante Alighieri, it developed into what became today known as the Italian language. Whereas an accent is a manner of pronunciation of a language with little or no changes in vocabulary or structure. For example, Southern American, the English that's spoken in the Midwest, versus the Northeast American. Okay, so what did the people of Lebanon speak through history? Okay. There are many different languages that passed over the land of Lebanon during its history, beginning with 3000 BC until the current day. We start with the Canaanite language, which is also known as the Phoenician, which was spoken around 3000 BC onwards. And at one point, the Greek language was introduced because Greece, as we know, occupied the known world at that point. So people started speaking a bit of Greek. In addition to that, the Aramaic after the Greek came, and it became the lingua franca of the whole region at that point. And it blended with the language that the people were speaking at that time. And following that, the Latin came with the Latin invasions, with the Roman invasions. And then the Syriac language was introduced with the church. And the Arabic language came in with the Islamic conquests. The French with the French Mandate. The English in current day, because it's the language of commerce. And this is what the Lebanese language is. Actually, there's a small thing here. There's also the Turkish language. Let's not forget about that. We were under Ottoman occupation for 400 years, so that was a very dominant language as well. So it is a blend of a lot of languages that passed over the land. So it's somewhat similar to the development of the Latin language. The Old Latin was spoken in Italy between 700 BC and 70 BC, and it developed into the more modern form of the Latin language. And from the Latin language, the Latin dialect started emerging, and from that dialect, it branched into several other dialects. And one of them was the dialect of Dante Alighieri in Tuscany. And then what happened then is that dialect itself became the basis for the modern Italian language today. And this is what happened with the Lebanese. People were speaking the Phoenician language at one point, and the Aramaic language came in and blended with the Phoenician, and then the Arabic and the Syriac were introduced, and they also blended with that language. So we never spoke specifically a very pure form of a language. We always spoke a contaminated form of the language. And that's how the Lebanese language became basically. Okay. So, the Lebanese language, how do we know the Lebanese language? Because there is a lot of Lebanese production. For example, many figures in Lebanese history has worked with the Lebanese language in production. One of them is Najib Jamal al-Din. The other one is Kamal Sharabi. And there are some examples here that where Romeo and Juliet was translated by Kamal Sharabi, or Sha'af min al-Nahj, which was translated by Najib Jamal al-Din.
What century?
This is the 20th century. Sa'id Ha'il also, we know, worked on the Lebanese language, and he was a forerunner of the Lebanese alphabet. Anis Freha worked a lot on the Lebanese language, and he tried to formulate a course to teach the Lebanese language at the American University of Beirut. There are also artistic productions with the Akhawan Rehbani, Asi and Mansour, Zaki Nassif, the productions of Zaki Nassif. So there are a lot of figures that worked within the framework of the Lebanese language. It's basically because they are Lebanese, and this is what the language that they spoke, that's the language that they knew. So almost all television production were, and almost still are, done in the Lebanese language, except for the news bulletins. So this is the ancestral language tree of the Lebanese language. It starts with the Proto-Semitic, and the West Semitic languages branch from that, and the Phoenician language is part of the West Semitic branch of languages, of the Semitic languages. And Aramaic is also another branch of West Semitic language. And that is why the Phoenician language and the Aramaic language are considered cousins, because they branch from the same exact West Semitic
Can you hold a
language.
second, please?
Yeah.
Ancient Aramaic,
Yes.
Aramaic, and Syriac. Give us the difference.
We'll have some questions and answers at the end.
Okay.
And I will keep that in mind.
No problem.
From ancient Aramaic, the Syriac language branched out. And then there is the Central Semitic languages, out of which the Arabic language branches out. Now, the Arabic language at one point also took from the ancient Aramaic language, because the Aramaic was the lingua franca of the whole region, including Arabia. So from the Syriac and the Phoenician and the Arabic developed what is called the Levantine Syro-Lebanese or Arabo-Canaanite language. It is the language that is mainly spoken in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Palestine. So if we look at the map, we can see the region where this language developed and where it was spoken. The Lebanese is spoken along the shores of Lebanon, the Syrian in Syria, of course, and the Palestinian in Palestine and parts of Jordan. So the Lebanese language has several dialects within it itself. There is the Northern Lebanese, which is the language spoken, which is the dialect spoken in the north. There is the Central Mountain Lebanese. There's the Southern Lebanese, the Durzi Mountain Lebanese, and the Biqai Lebanese. But there's also what is referred to as the modern Lebanese language. That is the language that's becoming more dominant today. That's the language that we hear everybody. It's like all other dialects are phasing out, and one more uniform language is emerging out of these. It's mainly because of television productions, a lot of radio and art shows, music. That is the language that is being used. And that is, there's also what is also referred to as classic Lebanese. And that is mainly the plays that are produced by the Rahbani brothers or the Fairuz songs, where there are some minor variations on the modern Lebanese language. Okay. So, the Lebanese grammar and the vocabulary, it's not less than 5,000 years old, because it takes from a lot of ancient languages. It takes, for example, from the Phoenician language. And this is a small example. If we read it in Phoenician, it says, "نحن اشبنينا بيت الأشمون القدوش بعين يدلول," which is in English translates as, "It was we who built a temple for the holy Ashmun in Ain Yadlul." And if you look at the structure of the sentence in the Phoenician language, it's not that different from the structure that we use in the Lebanese language, because it says, if you take it into Lebanese, translate it into Lebanese language, it means "نحن يلي بنينا بيت الأشمون القدوس بعين يدلول." So the grammatical structure is very, very close to that of the Phoenician language. Whereas if you want to say this in the Arabic language, for example, it would be "نحن هم الذين بنوا بيتا لأشمون المقدس في عين يدلول." And there is a big difference between the grammatical structure of the Arabic statement and that of the Lebanese and the Phoenician. So, we have also on the level of vocabulary, the Lebanese vocabulary is 5,000 years old and it's still developing, and it takes from many different languages that passed on the land of Lebanon. So, for example, the word Bayt comes from Canaanite, which means house in English. In Lebanese, it's Bayt, and in modern Lebanese is also Bayt. From the Aramaic and the Syriac language comes the word yad, and from the English, which means in English hand or arm, and the ancient Lebanese, ido, and the modern Lebanese, id.
What's in the Arabic?
It's yad. It's also yad. From the Persian comes the word firdaus. In English means paradise, and in ancient Lebanese it's firdaus, and modern Lebanese it's also firdaus. So that is a Persian word that we use today in our lexicon. From the Greek comes kastano, which means chestnut. In Lebanese, ancient and modern Lebanese, it's kastana. In ancient Lebanese, it's kastana, the same as the Greek language. And we use it today as kastana, and that comes from the Greek language. We take also from the Arabic a lot of vocabulary, some of which, for example, is iqtisad, meaning economy, and in ancient Lebanese it's iqtisad, and in modern Lebanese it's also iqtisad. From the Italian language we take a lot of words, farmacia, pharmacy, farmacia, and farmaciyi in modern Lebanese. From the Turkish language, for example, there's kundurachi, which means the shoemaker, and in ancient Lebanese and modern Lebanese it's kindarji. So that is the same as the Turkish. From the French and the English also, the word, for example, frein in French means the car brakes, and in modern Lebanese it's frein. We use it from the French. From the English, there's the word computer, of course, which we use it exactly the same in Lebanese. At this point, I'm going to be introducing my colleague, Mr. Hisham Bourjaili, and he's going to be talking about the Lebanese Language Institute and a little bit about what we do.
Thank you, Maroon. Thank you all here present. I saw that many of you were coming while the lecture has started. I would like to ask you, those who didn't receive the pamphlets yet, my friend Maroon is going to distribute you some of them. And I would like to remind some basic rules. I mean, I know we could have proceeded differently. We're going to have the lecture first. And I guarantee you, you will have time to ask plenty of questions afterwards. But please do not interrupt the speaker while speaking. We have an hour and a half till 11:30, so one more hour. I'm going to take a bit less than a half an hour, and we'll have half an hour for plenty of questions. I would like to thank the NAM for this wonderful opportunity, and thank you personally, because I know there are many interesting things ongoing at the same time of this lecture that are very interesting too. And if I were at your place, I would be tempted to visit the Maronite churches in the area, enjoy the weather today. Thank you for granting us your time. My friend Maroon tried to present in a nutshell a bit the history of Lebanon, and you notice the language follows the history of the country. We do not claim this is everything you need to know about the Lebanese language. It's a topic of research. We're still researching it. There are some results we're going to share with you today, and we're going to tell you about the Lebanese Language Institute. Why do we need a Lebanese Language Institute? There are a number of observations that prompt us to create the Lebanese Language Institute. First of all, if you meet people in the diaspora, that's to say, who migrated from Lebanon to all over the world, basically, you realize that second generation sometimes, or third generation, or even more, would like to learn the language of their fathers, of their ancestors. And when they try to learn it, they find it's not documented. And the resources they find sometimes are not even Lebanese, so they are prompted to learn Arabic, though I respect Arabic. It's a language, but it's not what the people speak in Lebanon. And those who are not convinced, you can try first to teach somebody Arabic, send them to Lebanon, and realize what's the problem. And if you don't want to hear it from Lebanese people, you're going to hear it from maybe non-Lebanese people trying to learn Lebanese. because the people interested in the diaspora sometimes are of Lebanese descent. Also, people who came to become relatives of Lebanese through marriages or friends of Lebanese, and they would like really to learn about Lebanon. And there is a barrier here, and the Lebanese people contributed to that barrier because, from their perspective, and I'm not blaming them, I understand in the homeland, it doesn't make big difference to say we speak Arabic or we speak Lebanese, because everybody or most of the people would get acquainted at some point with the Arabic language, and they speak the native, and there are many common things between Arabic and Lebanese, though they are different. So it doesn't make any difference for them. But for people in the diaspora, when they try to learn Lebanese and we start teaching them the Arabic script, first it's a barrier in itself to learn that script. And if they learn anything and they go and speak it in Lebanon, people there would laugh at them and say, you're speaking Mexican. And why Mexican? You know why? Because of the movies that are Mexican movies translated into Arabic, the literal Arabic. And this is the language of the movies, the Mexican movies. So it's really disappointing for somebody going to spend that much energy and time to learn the Arabic, and when they go speak Arabic with the Lebanese people, they call them Mexican. Well, that's not funny, actually. By the way, I respect the Arabic and the Mexican. Please, nothing personal here. So, realizing that there is really hardship and there is really demand for learning Lebanese, the Lebanese Language Institute put some objectives to address those needs, and among them, basic resources like an alphabet that people could use, and using the Latin